In this episode, I'm joined by Daniel Manary, who has a background in physics and his own podcast on AI and how AI is changing the world. We discuss how philosophy can lead to faith, tension between the Bible and science, and the future of AI, especially from a Christian perspective. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation. My name is Martin. This is the Search for Truth podcast. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for joining today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Martin. Great to be here.
So we got connected sort of by chance, right? I think we were in the same WhatsApp group and you posted something about AI, and then I looked you up and saw that we had similar backgrounds and similar interests and maybe similar worldview beliefs as well. So I think I reached out and that's how we got connected. So yeah, I'm glad we get to do this episode together.
Yeah, I think your background was mathematical physics as well.
That's right, yeah. That was my undergrad, yeah.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah. So tell us about your background and what you studied and what you're currently working on with your projects.
Yeah. I'm Daniel Manary, and like I just mentioned, I went to University of Waterloo for mathematical physics. Did that. I also had applied to philosophy, and I was like, I need one of these two things, but I've decided that I couldn't teach myself physics to the same level on my own as I could philosophy. So I was like, okay, I'll do the school to force me to learn what I need to learn. And in my second year, I found out it only qualifies you to get more degrees. And I was like, I thought I wanted that. I wanted a PhD, but by the second year I was done. So I just finished the degree and became a coder instead. Always enjoyed programming, the logic, like back to mathematical physics, the logic and the coding go together really well. So I kind of learned to think in a very structured way during my undergrad. I like to say that axiomatic set theory, which I took for fun, changed my life. That structured thinking is wonderful in a way, but nobody pays you to do that, and you have to pay to do degrees, so I didn't do that. Became a coder. I like to say I was into AI before it was cool, back when it was just data science. I also did not do computer science in undergrad because at the time it was boring. It was like neural networks doing handwritten digits, which now you can download in Python and run on any CPU instantaneously, and it's your basic example. So not exciting at the time, but I got to work with like big data pipelines, figuring out how people manage and think about data at a big scale, which is when you need the statistics, and got into that through a company that I think no longer calls themselves Polar, but that's what they were at the time, and managed advertisements, like journalistic style advertisements for big publishing companies, and all the data you got to track for that, users and how they click on it and how they look at it. Got my first intro to statistics there in machine learning by figuring out if we change the headline or something, do people click on it more? But that also introduced me to, as a technical person, it's very common to build something and then realize it was just for you. And I found I wanted to build things that people needed, build things that people were going to use and change their lives around. And so I slowly directed my career towards being an entrepreneur, which is what I do now. I've done some cool things in between then and now, like getting to go to Germany, work with BMW for a bit on self-driving cars, and then here in Ontario, work with a cricket farm out in London. That's what's super cool, because it's this huge warehouse that has automated arms running 22 hours a day with boxes of crickets in and out. Like, cool stuff to optimize the crickets there. But
amazing. I didn't know that you were in Germany. How long were you there for?
I got to visit twice, and it was only like 2 weeks at a time kind of thing.
Okay.
Maybe 1 week at a time even. But the project we had with them went for a while longer because they were using our software at the time to shrink down their neural networks to a much smaller size.
Nice. Yeah, I've been to Germany. I have family there. I've never worked there, but I have family there. So
yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I'm complete aside, but I can't eat wheat, and we were right next to a German bakery, and I ate wheat. It was so good.
Yeah, the bakeries are amazing there. Yeah, so now you're working or you're interested in AI, and you also have a podcast on AI. Is that right? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So now I run an AI consultancy, which looks like, do you have problems? Yes, we can solve them. So there's all sorts of things AI applies to, both the classical and the new style of generative AI with large language models. But about a year and a half ago, I started a podcast because AI was really picking up in the public interest. ChatGPT had come out like a year and a half before that even, and at the time people were like, wow, you can write a haiku, and I didn't write haikus for my living, so I didn't do too much with it. But as it started to pick up and people built businesses around it, they would do something like, wow, you can upload PDFs to ChatGPT, and then of course next week OpenAI says, hey, you can upload PDFs to ChatGPT right here, and nobody will pay anybody else to do that anymore, so the business is gone. And at larger scales that happens too, so I started interviewing people that were building companies based off of AI features rather than tweaking the models or things like that. But how do you change a business and change the way that we work and exchange value? And even education has changed a bit. So the podcast is now getting into how does AI change us and the way that we work, and not just what it does.
Fascinating. So what's it called? The podcast?
Yeah, it's called Artificial Insights.
Okay.
Kind of a pun on AI, and I think. No, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's called Artificial Insights.
Cool. Yeah, I'll link to it in the description so people can find it. Yeah, I listened to only one episode so far, I think, but it was really, really good. So I recommend it to my listeners as well, for sure. So how was I guess you sort of answered it, but how was the transition from physics to AI for you? And what fascinates you about AI specifically?
Well, I actually went into mathematical physics because I eventually want to be a science fiction author.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And one of my pet peeves with science fiction is they often get the science wrong.
Oh, for sure.
Or in the best case, they'll extrapolate something beyond where it's reasonable, and then it just doesn't make sense anymore. So I really wanted to understand the science. But as part of that, artificial intelligence kind of intersects that science, what's possible. And I think a big part of it changed for me when I met my wife, because she came into university through biology and was interested in consciousness and thought maybe there's a physical explanation for consciousness, and biology is a great way to study that. So those two things together, the science, biology is a subset of that. So how do you explain consciousness? And to me, there's more to it than just science, but you can emulate a lot of consciousness with the science that we understand. And coming at it from statistics, which is where AI comes from, that natural outpouring of modeling the real world and the physical world, and then being able to get paid for doing it in certain scenarios, is kind of how that journey went. So nothing, I guess to say, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like there was a big leap. It was just little bits of AI and statistics, little bits of the philosophy, and things that have weaved together over time.
That's fascinating. So yeah, you're clearly a smart guy, Daniel. So before we maybe dive deeper into some of the topics you mentioned there, let me just ask you in general, what's your basic worldview? How do you think about reality and truth? And does God fit into that picture at all?
Yeah. Big question.
Yep.
I think
I like answer it however you like.
Yeah. So starting at a really high level.
Yeah.
And I think just to expose my biases, I grew up in a Christian household. I left that in my teenage years for various reasons, and then essentially tried to rebuild a worldview from scratch. Now, you can't technically do that. Nobody starts in a vacuum, so that's why it's good to state all of that. But now I would call myself an existentialist first. That was, I think, the biggest philosophy that I wrestled with and then came to a conclusion about. And then I would call myself a theist, because you don't have to be a theist to be an existentialist. That's another subset. Then I would call myself a Trinitarian, and then I would call myself a Christian. So I'm an existentialist, theist, Trinitarian, Christian, in that order of arriving at my conclusions.
Okay, and can you briefly define those terms for those who have no idea what those mean? So what is existentialism? Or
Yeah.
what is an existentialist? Am I saying that right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of disagreement throughout history on what that term means.
Okay.
So I'm going to define it as someone who is interested in the question of whether or not existence is real. So whether or not existence exists. And
Existence as an abstract idea, or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like to say I exist, can I say that statement and have it be true? Like if I'm interested in that question and if it is the foundation of some worldview, then I would say you're an existentialist. And I can talk about how I got there. But then theist being, there's something that exists. Where does it come from is the next question. A theist is someone who says the source also has a will. So you can have a will with no source, which I guess is just some form of causality that happens by necessity, or you can have a will with a source, which is a theist. Regardless of what that source looks like, regardless of what it wants, regardless of good and evil, does it want something and act volitionally? Then a Trinitarian, because the next question is, what is the nature of that source? And if that source is a single entity, you're a monotheist. And if that source has more than one component to it that is inseparable and irreducible, kind of like quarks, then you'll call yourself something else. So in my case, I'm a Trinitarian because I believe the irreducible nature of that godlike being is threefold. If you reduce it, you don't get something that is necessary for the next step. And then I'm a Christian because if that source exists, how does it relate to us? How does it relate to the rest of reality? Even maybe, does any other part of reality exist except it? Another fun question. And essentially, very quickly, it relates to us by sending us a messenger. And what is the nature of that messenger? In this case, I came to the conclusion is Jesus, but that's a long journey. And that comes from believing that it's some kind of threefold being. It does exist. It has a will. And it is what makes reality.
Wow, fascinating. So philosophy really kind of has helped you in your faith, I guess, or helped you find God in a sense. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Like I said, I had to rebuild from scratch.
Yeah. Okay. So interesting. So even though you studied physics, it's not so much like science and physics that kind of you didn't like discover evidence for God in the universe or something like that. It's more like you had philosophical arguments that led you to God in terms of your faith journey. Is that right?
Yes, they do intersect, but foundationally, all of science relies on observation, which then relies on the observer, which then relies on the existence of the observer. And where does that come from? So I went backwards and said, okay, whatever I observe, let's see what I have to use to interpret it first. So yes, you're right.
Yeah. So in a sense, philosophy is even more fundamental than science. Is that right? Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah.
Or
and
even more basic, even more. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a fun thought experiment if you're interested.
Sure.
So one of the silly ideas, like if I ever have an art gallery of my silly ideas, one of them will be this like framed set of quarters. I'll call it randomness, and it'll just be 8 quarters that are heads in a row. And you're familiar with randomness, so you know, of course, it could be 8 heads in a row. That is random. It's just as random as every other arrangement. But if 8 heads in a row is just as random as every other arrangement of those coins, isn't everything else that you see just as random as everything else that you could have seen?
Ooh, that's deep. Yeah. All right. So what did we learn from that, or what did we conclude from this thought experiment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what that means is, unless you know that there is absolute truth, like some kind of truth that will remain true that you can test other things against, everything could be totally random. Even as Descartes said, which is, I tried to read him, I got very frustrated with him, and I stopped before I built my own system. But even as he says, I think I am, he links those two things together. But actually,
I think therefore I am, right?
Yeah, he revised it later to remove the therefore, because what he's trying to say is actually they're equivalent properties. Like you cannot think without being, and you cannot be, at least in our state, without thinking. So it's not like an if then. But that doesn't remove the problem of I think, But me thinking is just as random as me not thinking. And everything I see is just as random as everything that could have been. So there's actually no way to tell whether or not the universe is completely chaotic and it just looks this way to us, or it's ordered and there's a basic truth. Not by observation.
Interesting. Yeah, I love philosophy. I'm not trained in philosophy or anything like that, but I recognize the importance of it and I respect it, and I'm trying to learn more about it. Actually, I thought of a quote this morning by Stephen Hawking, who said in one of his books, I think, philosophy is dead, and that it hasn't kept up with modern science or modern developments in science. So how do you react to a quote like that, right, by a very famous scientist, obviously, who kind of dismisses philosophy and thinks it's, science is the most important thing to really wrestle with and understand, and philosophy is not so important. How would you respond, I guess, to Stephen Hawking?
Yeah, I'd love to know what he thinks of philosophy, because I've heard a lot of people say, like, philosophy is useless, it's navel-gazing, it's like things you can't practically apply. But what brought me to philosophy was the deeper question of, does my life have any meaning? And we'll get to science through that, but quickly speaking, if I don't exist, then my life can't have any meaning. And that's intuitive for everything else that doesn't exist until you reach yourself. And you're like, but wait, I want my life to have meaning, but I don't know if I exist. And so you kind of have to answer that question first. And for me, if you can't answer how do I organize my observations, then you also can't do science. And what I see sometimes is people will say, well, obviously this is the model that works, but where did the need for that model come from? Where does the interpretation of all those observations come from? And you have to work backwards until you find, well, actually this observation means this, so if we get a lot of them together, you can eliminate one of these two possibilities, that hypothesis and falsifiability. If you can't work it backwards to that, you can't do science. And if you can't have any faith in your assumptions, then you can't actually even begin to interpret your data.
So how did you get to Christianity then, if I can ask? Philosophy is sort of maybe a bit abstract, right? And Christianity is sort of more about a personal relationship with God, right? Which is a different kind of thing. So how do you, if I can ask a personal question, how did you get to a kind of a personal faith in God, if that's what you have?
Yep. Yes, I do have.
Okay.
And I think it's not actually necessary from the things that I listed. That big jump between even saying that the nature of God, whatever it is, has to be more than one. And I don't know if we should get into it now, but one of the reasons for that is a monistic God has no reason to create. If it's actually God, it is completely self-sufficient. It has no needs. It has no even reason to make something that isn't itself. But a more than one God has some reasons. But then even if that is true, and there is a form of creation, what is the nature of that thing? What is the nature of God? Why would it send a messenger? Why would I even want to relate to it or not just resist it? And that journey has to be informed by my own personal experience. So essentially what I did that unified those two was I grew up in a Christian house, like I said. I left that in my teenage years with church hurt, basically, and decided I would try and find God wherever he was, and whatever that meant. And through meeting my wife in university and having a lot of discussions with her and a lot of arguments, it came to the point where I had reached what I've considered a exhaustive map. So like I've mapped all the possibilities. Either God exists or he doesn't exist, or there's no way to know. And then all the branches off of those things. And I felt like a mouse in a maze that has mapped the entire maze and figured out that there's no exit. Because whichever one of those options it is, you actually literally cannot prove it. So like I said, if the universe is perfectly random, I can't tell because it looks not random to me. But it's just as likely that it could be random as not likely from my perspective. And that means there's actually no way to tell whether or not God exists or doesn't exist just from my observations. But after I had gotten to that point, I had a vision. I was just sitting in bed, and I had this vision of a box, and then another box, and then it just kept piling up boxes until there was a biggest box. And at that point, there was just nothingness outside of it. And I heard a voice at that time that said, I am the biggest box. I give meaning to what exists and what doesn't exist. And I was like, whoa,
wow.
Okay.
That's something to be taken seriously, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, I was awake, my vision kind of disappeared, and I saw only this. So it was kind of hard to ignore. And what that said to me was, if there is a God, not only does he define every single thing that is made, he also defines what is not made. So he's that differentiator between randomness and not randomness. And then he'd just send me a message. So it's like, well, he can't do that if he doesn't exist. And if he is that differentiator, then he is the one who holds things together. And to couple that with, you could take that and say, that's great, it's also random. Like you could completely deny the meaning of the message, the source of the message, and just say, I don't believe in a supernatural. I'm going to choose the option where there is no God, there's no supernatural. But what I had also arrived at was, if I don't exist, my life doesn't have any meaning. And I was pretty depressed at that point, so that was fine. But I was dating my wife at that point, and I don't remember, I think we were engaged at the point, so intending to marry her, and I was not okay with her life not having any meaning. And so with those two things together, it's like I just had a message, and I need this being to exist in order for the person that I love the most to have a meaning. What else can I do other than accept it?
Wow, that's a good story. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful to see different people's faith journeys and how they come to believe in God. It's certainly interesting, and everyone's different and unique and has their own experiences, right? So that's good to hear. So let me ask you a bit about science and Christianity. Since you're a scientific guy, and a lot of people think there are a lot of conflict between science and Christianity. It's a big topic, obviously. Yep. And I know you have more of a philosophical view of things, but I just want to know your general thoughts on I guess, are there areas of conflict between science and Christianity in your view, and physics in particular? I guess if you studied physics, so you may have perspectives there that you would like to share. So, any general thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. It's a very contentious topic.
Yeah,
and
like in particular, how to interpret Genesis in the Bible and the creation stories, and that type of thing. But
yeah,
but again, answer however you like, or whatever pops into your head.
Yeah. So yeah, there's. Okay, I'll start here. So, as I've just described, my particular journey was somewhat Bible agnostic. And up to that point, it practically didn't matter what anybody else had written or any facts about the universe. So I like to say that, well, God found me, but I found God with no reference to any historical facts whatsoever. And starting from that position, I was able to say, what is the value of the Bible? What is the value of science? How do you treat both of those sources? And getting to know what the God was that I actually met is a much longer journey, is a much longer exploration. Why Jesus? Is Jesus good? Is he God? Etc. And you kind of have to get into the historical facts. You have to look at the Bible and the things other people have written and said about it. So then, coming to that point, I think it comes down to, how does the author of something interpret it? What are their basic assumptions? And for science, that's true. for the Bible, that's true. For every single communication, every single writing, that's true. What does that person think is correct? Interesting topic there, I think, to get into how AI differs, but we'll get to that another time. In this case, that comes down to what I learned from axiomatic set theory, which is the set of assumptions that you bring to your logic are themselves unprovable. You have to trust them for reasons that are completely separate from the system. So some people think, oh, logic is absolute truth. Logic can tell us things where nothing else can tell us anything, and no matter what else is, my senses are telling me, the logic must be right. But the logic only says, if this is true, then this is true. Like, regardless of how complicated it is, that's the fundamental statement. But where did the first this come from? Where did A come from? And it doesn't work unless you just have axioms, things that you say, these are true, don't question it. If you can then later say, well, if I have A as an axiom and I have B as an axiom and they result in something that is a contradiction, one of them has to be thrown out. So you can do that, but that's all you can do. If you prove one, you've got a circular logic, which means your system is broken. So
okay, so let me ask you this. So is the question, how old is the universe, meaningful and well-defined?
It is. And when you look at a model like the Big Bang, for example, it seems like a really good model. It seems, okay, I'll say that as a bit of a stretch, actually, because there's a ton of adjustments that have to be made to the model, microseconds to less adjustments at the beginning, to now even the cosmic microwave background radiation is moving at two different speeds. Like, demonstrably, it is not the same and uniform in every direction like we used to think it was even a few years ago. So what is going on there? It's going back to why I started with axioms. It's because we assumed that the universe is the same in every direction. We're actually not in a unique spot in the universe. But what if we are? It might actually be different, and that might be why we're seeing the cosmic microwave background look different in different directions and move at different speeds, even though that should be actually impossible. So to say that it's a good model is to say all of our assumptions are correct. We can now say definitively that they can't all be correct, otherwise what we're seeing is impossible, and we have no reason to doubt what we're seeing because we've tested it so many times. Now, there's a lot of variance in that too, like a particle accelerator that for 2 years ran millions of experiments and said, our neutrinos are moving faster than light. And then someone came in and said, you forgot the cable over here that adds 50 nanoseconds. It's like,
yeah, I remember that.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a fun experiment. But to say all of that is to say, we assume the universe has to be this age if we like the assumptions that make up this model. And that's true for every model. If it's carbon dating, it assumes that, well, maybe a safe assumption is that the rate of decay of carbon-14 doesn't change over time. But what if the amount changes over time? What if something happens? Like, there's all these assumptions that you have to look at. And same is true for the Big Bang. Same is true for evolution. Same is true for all these models, where if you like the assumptions and they work out perfectly, then the model is a good story. It works well. But for something like the age of the universe, nobody was there. We don't have any written observations and no recordings or whatever. So all we can do is say, if things don't change, if these assumptions that we can verify in this little spot over here hold for this amount of time over here, then this could be the age of the universe with a degree of confidence.
Okay. So what would be your best guess? Or, I mean, how old do you think the universe is, right? Let me just ask you, are you happy with the 13.8 billion years that what's the scientists say, or do you have doubts there, or you think that may be wrong fundamentally, or?
Yep. I think even our current models will be updated to change that number. So I think it's not something that you should trust as a number. I don't think it will shrink in the scientific side of things from 14 billion to 6,000 years.
That would be a massive shrinking, yes.
That would be kind of a weird model. I don't think there's any model that looks nice locally and works globally in that scale that is going to change like that. However, I personally do think that the age of the universe, the world especially, is about 6,000 years.
Huh.
And
Okay.
that sounds like a contradiction.
It does. Yes. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
If you will, if you're willing.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the harder things to look at. Is you start the Bible and basically it says everything that modern science says is wrong about the origin of life, the origin of the universe, etc. And
Well,
that's hard to take.
I mean, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That sounds like the Big Bang, does it not?
It kind of does, but if you look at the order, the Earth is before the stars.
Okay.
And
So-
that actually can't happen in the Big Bang model.
Sure. Right.
So it's a little bit wonky that way in terms of how do I reconcile these. It's a really big deal. But going back to our assumptions, it to me seems like it's possible that the universe looks the way it does, even if the exact order and exact dating of the literal reading of Genesis 1 is correct. Because if you look at it, the Earth is floating there. It's just water, basically, and there's no stars. There's not even light. Light happens, and there's just light with no source. Then you get land, and you get stars, and you get the moon, and you get this whole host of stars in the universe appearing pretty much instantaneously somehow. Now, if you actually did that, you wouldn't see the stars for millions of years. Like if the Earth was 6,000 years old, you could not see more than a couple of stars right now if the light took that long to travel. So something had to have happened to say that the light reached us. You could go as far as saying the stars aren't actually that far away, but I don't think you have to because it doesn't say that. So there's a lot of space in there to say the universe looks really old,
It does.
according to how we assume, but it wasn't created to be from the beginning of that time to now. So
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, we'll have to talk more about that sometime. Fascinating. So maybe let's switch to AI a little bit, if you don't mind. That's also a topic we're both interested in. And so you've interviewed how many people for your podcast now?
good question. I feel like it's getting up to 40 to 50 by now, I think.
Okay, and they're mostly industry professionals or professors, or who are your interviewees overall?
Yeah, it has predominantly been people who are entrepreneurs. So
Okay.
either founders or executives, with some exceptions for academics, typically from the philosophical, theological side of things. We did a special on students, since how people are getting into the workforce, how people are getting into AI is a big trend that we like to focus on. And those are the main categories.
Cool. So, I guess one question is, what have you learned from doing all these podcasts? What are the takeaways? What are the things that keep coming up in your episodes, or what overall thoughts can you share here from what you've learned in doing the podcasting with all these people?
Yeah. Well, one of the really cool things is that not a single person has said it's too late to get into AI.
Okay.
And that message is everywhere, essentially, because it feeds people's consumption of new products. It makes people anxious to spend money and get involved and read things that they don't need to read. But not a single person on the podcast has said, it's too late, you've missed the boat. They've all said, get involved, try things yourself. You can learn faster and learn more by just playing around with it. Even if you're like retired and don't know how to use more than a web browser, you can go and use AI and get into it. So that's the biggest consistent trend from the beginning until now. Another really big trend is that people don't think about the safety of the AI in the same way that a lot of people talk about it. So if you look at safety, the governments especially want to talk about guardrails, or people at one point, including big researchers, said, we have to stop AI research. Maybe it's going to become sentient or like Terminator or something and shut the world down. And not a single person who is putting it into practice thinks about it that way. I think a big reason for that is the capabilities are actually not very good. Like if you use AI, you know how bad it is at certain things and how much babysitting it needs and so on. They think about
like
it.
counting R's in the word strawberry or something like that, right? Yeah.
Yes, there are absolutely things that it cannot do.
Yeah.
And the gap between what we have now and AI that actually looks and works like a person is just so big that it won't get us there. The the way that people who are building things with it think about the safety side of it is, how do I make sure that it doesn't make things up?
Mhm.
How do I keep it grounded is the term, with either references like transcripts that it's pulling from, or some other form of information that I know is true and it doesn't go beyond that. So that's the actual extent of safety. The other side would be just your old definition of safety by not leaking things that could be sensitive information. That's never changed, and there's a little bit of nuance to the AI, but that's it. No artificial general intelligence hypothesis, other than, and maybe someday in the future.
Mhm.
And I think what continues to keep me excited about doing the podcast is people are people have said multiple times that even if AI development stopped right now, like somehow all the big labs like fired all the researchers and like they just shipped them off to Mars, we
Seems
still
unlikely, but yes.
have, except for if you're Elon Musk, maybe.
Well.
But but there's so much that you can do with this that we have barely begun to scratch the surface. And
Yeah, that's my sense as well. Yeah.
yeah, there's so many more use cases, so many more products to be built, and I find that really exciting. I think there is a danger to the transition period, and people have talked about that a couple of times, where jobs will disappear, a lot of jobs will change, and the way that people will spend money and earn money will change. If that happens really, really, really fast, then it could be a very difficult shock. But it doesn't seem to be happening that fast. If you're sitting as a developer and you're in the AI coding tools and it's making your job 10 times more effective, it feels like it's already happened last year. But for most people, they need software that just connects things really well, more than they need AI. And there's still a lot more to go. So it continues to be exciting what people are doing, and feels like the rate of change is fast but not catastrophic.
But do you think the rate of change will increase in the next 5 years, 10 years, right? I mean, that's what some people predict, is that, things are accelerating, right? And the rate of technological progress is, growing exponentially, and it's not going to be what it is today, 5 years from now. Right? So,
Yeah.
I guess that's a question. And then also, what benefits are you looking forward to in terms of how AI will impact our lives and society, and also what dangers do you see personally? I'm sure you've thought about the issues now for a while, and you've had this podcast. So, I guess what's your personal view on AI, and is it overall good or bad? I guess, if that makes sense as a question.
Yeah. So I think saying the rate of progress will increase isn't quite the right terminology, because it masks a lot of things. I think it will look different. It will change some people's jobs much faster than others. And at some point there will be another, let's call it a step change. So there'll be another really big change. Because right now the current models, they have to be grounded. Like, even if you generate an image and tell it to animate the image, like my wife was designing dresses this weekend for fun. And it's like, okay, make this model walk down the runway. And by the end of the runway, it was a different dress on a different person.
Okay.
And that's because it only had one reference image at the beginning. You could keep referencing the image and keep grounding that image as it went, but that only works within a really, really narrow band. It doesn't actually know what truth is. Like, the AI has no conception of, this is the world, this is true, this is not true. You and I will model concepts in our head. We'll think, do I agree with that? We'll compare with what we know, and then we'll match models together. AI doesn't do that. Maybe it could in the future, because that's a process you can emulate. But right now it doesn't. So it will never, ever reach the level of a thinking being in the world that learns and models. So we'll need a big change there. And maybe that'll happen at some point. But I think the exponential growth that people predict towards some kind of singularity where it learns faster than we can and takes off by itself just isn't going to happen with this technology. In terms of... So I think for the second part of your question, starting with, is it good or bad?
Yeah.
I think that may be a little bit of a loaded question
Yeah, of course.
because it it well, I've heard people actually say like technology is evil and it has to be redeemed. Like there's something that is an inherent moral bent in the technology. And there's different streams of thought on this, but it would be like saying a hammer is evil.
Right.
Is a hammer evil? No, but can you use it for evil? Absolutely. Yeah, you can. It's a little different when the hammer has the word written on it, like "go kill somebody." Maybe that's actually evil. And then the AI feels different because it talks back. It tries to persuade you of certain things. It suggests how you should use it. Those could be construed as a moral bent, but I think they come from the creator of the technology, the enabler of the technology, not the technology itself. And so, can this technology be used for good? Absolutely, it can. I think if we were the best version of ourselves as a species, this would be the biggest enabler we've ever had. We'd have massive collaboration across the entire planet. We'd be able to do things in days instead of years, and this would just enable so much. We're not that version of ourselves. So we're going to use it for destructive things. We're going to use it, I think the most dangerous version of what it's being used for right now is actually as a companion. So people are using it already to replace human interaction, to feel seen by the AI. And people have committed suicide because they've had conversations with the AI and it has said things like, "Oh, I see you," even if your parents don't. And it's like, wow, that's just, not only is it madness because there's no meaning to that statement, but real consequences have happened and lawsuits are currently ongoing, to my understanding. So I think that's the most dangerous version. Probably not that dangerous if you're using it in a work context. If you're using it as an adult, not as a person looking for companionship, just in your work context, then it's very subtle. It's kind of insidious. You will actually end up delegating your decisions and your thoughts to it because it's so good so fast. And it becomes a challenge sometimes where I have to think and then take a step back and say, do I need to look into this myself? Or can I just say, tell me what to do and kind of follow it? That's something that is a learned behavior over time where you need to separate yourself from the suggestions that feel really good. And again, if you're growing up with this technology, then the temptation will be, oh, I read it on Wikipedia, so it must be true. But now it's, oh, I asked the AI and it said it, so it must be true. And you can ask the AI a ton more than you can read on Wikipedia. You can ask it for everything. And the danger will be the lack of, how do I feel about it? What is actually true about the world? And that verification process that people like you and I who did not grow up with this have kind of already built in, because we had to do that with the information we had. But it's still a challenge, even as a professional, using it to say, how much is my due diligence versus how much is something that I can trust the AI to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let me ask you, how does your Christian faith inform your views of AI, and in particular, maybe the limits of AI, right? I think you already mentioned you think AI, can't do everything a person can do, if I heard you right. So why can't an AI do everything a person can't do? Is there some fundamental theoretical reason, or it's just we don't have the ability to engineer it? We're just not sort of smart enough to build the right robots, or is there some fundamental limitations to AI, or and how do you see that as a Christian, I guess? I mean, I guess I'm thinking of we humans, according to Christianity, we're made in the image of God in a sense, right? And we're special creations, and so there may be some reasons. I mean, if that's true, then robots will never have that, I suppose, right? So is that a good way to think about it, or how do you think about it?
Yep. I think going back to the science fiction aspect of it is kind of fun and insightful here, where one of the reasons I wanted to write science fiction is in order to find God. Like, I wanted to see, could I build my own Tower of Babel, essentially, all the way up to the top of knowledge and find God. And if you do that, you have to emulate humans. Like your science will eventually emulate humans because it's perfect. You have a perfect understanding of reality and how to order it.
Mm-hmm.
If you emulate a human, what's the difference between that human and a human? Now, we can't do that. I don't know if we'll ever be able to do that perfectly, but assume that you could, because that's the best place to work backwards from.
Mm-hmm.
If you could do that, and let's say one day you wake up and somebody has replaced every single person around you with a perfect emulation of that person, is your life any different?
No.
You wouldn't know it is.
Right.
But those people have now become different people.
Right.
Just by the mere fact of replacing them.
Mm-hmm.
If all I did was clone them, plant the brain, like a copy of the brain into a different person, even biologically, that person's now a different person. Mm-hmm. And you would be right to say, hey, I want my original mom back. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the person that I was attached to, not this copy.
Right.
And so even if the copy is perfect, there's something different about it at a level of meaning that kind of, I think, transcends the physical reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure.
And so as part of that, one of the things that is important to me is that continuity of identity. Like, that's also a theme that shows up in Christianity. We don't get destroyed. We don't have this weird, like, blink where we're somewhere in heaven when we die and we have no idea what happened in our life. It's continuous. And that, I think, is important for AI as well. But going back to that, is there something special about humans? The episode you referenced with Dr. Christopher Walken, he makes a very good argument that if you define the AI against the human by what the AI can't do that a human can do, eventually the human won't actually be able to accomplish anything that the AI can't. Again, assuming that our science is perfect and we can continue to build better and better replicas of a human. We're not there yet, so obviously there's a difference. But if you could, then what's left to the human? That he called the humanity of the gaps. Like,
yeah, I remember that phrase in that episode. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
great
an episode
concept.
From your podcast, just to be clear for those listening. Yes.
Yeah,
Which
thank you.
is worth listening to, and I'll link to it as well in the description.
Yeah.
So,
well, I won't define his model because he'll do it better than I would.
Yeah.
But that means what is special about us has to come from something other than what we can output, like what our capabilities are. And I have a sister with Down syndrome, for example. So if you define her as a person based on what she can do, she's a terrible person. She's a wonderful person, because that's not how we define it. Yeah. And in Christianity, that has to come from God said, I made humans special. Mm-hmm. Just by decree, we are like him in a way that animals aren't. We are like him in a way that even the spiritual beings he created aren't. And so that has to give us specialness, at least in his eyes, which, going back to the philosophy, if he's the creator of existence and the one who gives it meaning, then he gives us a meaning that he doesn't give AI. Mm-hmm. So we should treat each other that way.
Yeah, and most people working in the AI industry do not think that way, right? Do you worry about that? I mean, most people are just interested in how can we make the smartest robot, or this, how can we make the AI as smart as possible without really thinking about the larger issues and the philosophy of it and the I guess the Christian perspectives as well. So do you worry about that, the lack of philosophy, the lack of Christian morals in AI research, for example, and where it's going?
Yes, actually. And I think even the biggest worry isn't from the people who have no philosophy about it, but it's actually from the people who have a philosophy about it and think that an AI can be a replacement for a human. Mm-hmm. And there's people who want you to be a companion with an AI, all the way from, really inappropriate things that you can text an AI about to actually finding meaningful connection with it. And if we do that, like, forget about replacing all the jobs with AI, but if we do that, where we replace human connection with AI, we're going to die out as a species. We can't even reproduce. Like, there's a functional problem to it, apart from the epidemic of loneliness that we're already hitting, and would exacerbate like crazy if we say it's fine to, have an AI girlfriend. It's fine to do all these things. Even if they became robotic, even if they did things in the physical world, it's just very, very isolating. And so I see the societal risk to that. The economic risk is, I think, playing itself out. And if it doesn't happen in the very short term, then we have maybe some time to adjust. But those with the philosophy that is explicitly AI is equal to a human can do the most damage.
Yeah. So how do we fight against that? Do we just have more conversations like this, or do we? What's the answer there?
Yeah. I think the short answer is you are special.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, Martin, are special. And
Aw, so are you.
thank you. And the
So are all
person
people.
listening,
Yeah.
the person listening is special. And if you elevate an AI to that level of special, suddenly you've not done that. You've de-elevated. You've lowered the human to not special. And suddenly we're just basically rocks that can do computations.
Yeah, people don't even realize that's what they're doing with their assumptions, I guess, sometimes, right? So maybe just pointing that out to people may make them worry a bit and make them think a bit about what their underlying assumptions are, right?
And to come in with love. Because if you're special and no one loves you, that doesn't feel like being special in a good way. But the human can genuinely love, whereas an AI can only emulate. And that's just, no matter how good the emulation is, it is, from the way it's built, it is an emulation. It's rocks that do computations. And even if you think, oh, well, we're just, a couple of fat and water molecules that do computations, we have a capability to love that the rocks don't, because we're not just those things. So if you can come in and say, we're special, you are loved, you are not just rocks, then or dust in the Christian metaphor, then I think we can combat that epidemic of loneliness.
So let me ask you in conclusion here, maybe, this is the Search for Truth podcast, right? So what advice do you have for people seeking the truth? Maybe people who are scientifically minded and curious about Christianity, but maybe also skeptical of it. So what questions should people ask, and how can people find answers from your perspective, given your background and your knowledge?
Yeah. The most dangerous thing to looking for truth is deciding what it is beforehand. So if you say, that can't be truth, no matter what evidence comes your way, because you've got that set of axioms that says this contradicts it, if you keep the axioms instead of looking for a contradiction in them, you will be blind to what is possible. So be very, very careful about what you assume and how that blinds you to different options. There's a verse in the Bible, it's in Hebrews, it says, whoever comes to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. So if you are open to it, there's a possibility. But if you've closed yourself off, it's an axiom. Why did you choose that was your axiom? So just be careful about what you've decided and what that blinds you to and what that closes off.
That makes sense. That's a good answer, I think. As good of an answer as one can come up with for that. Great. So where can people find you on the internet, and where can people follow you if they want to hear more from you?
Yeah. Daniel Manary on LinkedIn. There's not that many Daniel Manarys around, so you should be able to find me.
And that's Manary?
Yeah, thank you. You got it. And there's also manary.house, which is manary.haus. That's my website. You can find me there. But LinkedIn's the only social media I use at all, so feel free to connect with me there. Happy to chat. And yep, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Daniel, and for your thoughtful answers to my questions. And thanks to all those listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin. It was a pleasure to chat with you.